Okay, solve by completing the square. So x squared minus 11x plus 18 equals 0. When you are asked to complete the square, there's a couple of first things that you have to make sure. First of all of the constants need to be brought to the other side of the equal sign so we can deal with the variables and start factoring. So I'll go ahead and rewrite that into x squared minus 11x equals negative 18. And yes, there is a reason I left that empty space, and we'll get to that in just a minute. The next thing that you need to be able to deal with is looking at the coefficient in front of the x squared and make sure it's 1. Okay, in this case it is 1. If not, you would have to divide every single term by whatever that coefficient is. Okay. Alright, and then there's the actual completing the square step. Okay, and the completing the square step, once you have it into this form, I'll put a little star here so you know this is the main form you need your equation to look like. Okay, the x is on the left, the loose number on the right, even with a blank space there. The steps are always the same. First, you're going to take this middle number, just the number, the coefficient, not the x. You're going to divide this by 2. Okay, if it reduces, do so. Okay, but in this case it doesn't. Always divided by 2. And then you're going to square it. In this case I get 121 fourths. Okay, every single time that's what you're going to do. Take the middle number, divide it by 2, and then square it. And then what happens is that is what is added to both sides of the equal sign. Okay, so you're going to have to add that to both sides of the equal sign. Now let me go ahead and rewrite that to see what we have. We now have x squared minus 11x plus 121 fourths equals negative 18 plus 1 fourths. Don't be afraid of the fractions. It's not going to change anything too much. Okay. All right, the next thing is going to be the actual factoring. Okay. Once you have taken the middle number, divided by 2, squared it, and then added to both sides, what happens on the left-hand side, this is now a perfect square. Okay, and which means it does factor nicely. Okay. You are welcome to learn how to factor with the fractions, or try to pay attention and always check your work, things like that. But all of the factoring tricks, what's nice about completing the square is it'll always be a binomial square. That's why it's called the perfect square. Okay, and this number that we're looking for is always going to be, let me go back, the number you got before you squared it, 100% of the time. So in this case it was negative 11 halves, so this will be negative 11 halves. Instead of having to find two numbers that multiply to 121 fourths and add to negative 11, this just made it easier. Okay. Alright, so that factored on the left-hand side, and then of course on the right-hand side you are going to have to combine. So negative 18 plus 121 fourths, I would make that negative 18 over 1. Deal with adding those fractions, okay, and you'll end up with negative 49 over 4. Okay. Alright, once you're in this form, now you look at this equation and realize, okay, now I have the square by itself. I need to solve for x. Go ahead and take the square root of both sides and see what happens from there. Alright, so you take the square root of both sides. I'm going to rewrite that, and I will end up with x minus 11 halves equals. Now when you take the square root of both sides, don't forget you get that lovely plus or minus. And it was the fraction negative 49 fourths. Okay. And then simplify. Simplify your root. Always, always, always simplify your root. So x minus 11 halves equals plus or minus. Now I know the square root of 4 is 2. So I can just bring that out right away. It's on the bottom, so the 2's on the bottom. I also know the square root of 49 is 7. Okay, so the square root of 49 gave me the 7, but let me actually highlight this here. So the square root of 49 became the 7, and then let's talk about that negative. The square root of that negative is going to become I. So the square root of the negative is that I right there. Okay. Alright, so that's what we have. So then you're going to still continue on to try to get x by itself. This 11 halves you can add to both sides, and I will end up with x equals 11 halves plus or minus, now I have 7i halves. Okay. Right, which can be written as 11 halves plus 7i halves, comma 11 halves minus 7i halves. Ta-da!